I investigated a crime scene. The killer couldn't have been human. Being a detective has taught me one thing. The world is a brutal, messy place. People kill for money, jealousy, or just because they can. After a decade on the force, I thought I'd seen it all. But last week, I was called to a crime scene that changed everything. It was a quiet, rainy night when the call came in. A double homicide out in the woods, near an abandoned cabin. Dispatch didn't have many details, just that a couple of hikers had stumbled across something gruesome. Gruesome didn't even begin to cover it. The drive out there was long, winding through dense forest that seemed to press in on all sides. By the time I arrived, the rain had turned the dirt road into a muddy mess. The squad cars and ambulances were parked haphazardly, their flashing lights casting eerie patterns against the trees. The first officer I spoke to was pale, his hands trembling as he tried to light a cigarette. "What are we looking at?" I asked. He shook his head. "You're not going to believe this, detective. I've never seen anything like it." He wasn't wrong. The cabin was old, the kind of place you'd expect to see in a horror movie. The door was hanging off its hinges, and the interior was trashed. Furniture overturned, broken glass everywhere. And in the middle of the room were the bodies, or what was left of them. The first victim was a man, mid-30s, his torso torn open as if by some massive claw. His ribs were bent outward, his organs scattered across the floor like someone had rummaged through them. His face was frozen in a mask of terror, his eyes wide and unseeing. The second victim was a woman, her body partially slumped against the wall. Deep gashes ran across her neck and chest, the wounds so precise they looked almost surgical. But it was her expression that got to me. Her face wasn't twisted in fear like the man's. It was blank, as though she'd been dead before she even realized what was happening. The forensics team was already at work, but the lead tech, Angela, looked as shaken as the rookie outside. "What do you have for me?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She hesitated before answering. "We found tracks outside, leading up to the cabin." "Tracks?" "Yeah, but they're strange. You need to see them for yourself." I followed Angela outside, where the rain had turned the ground into a muddy canvas. Sure enough, there were tracks leading from the tree line to the cabin. But they weren't human. The prints were massive, about twice the size of a man's foot, and ended in sharp, claw-like impressions. "Bear?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Angela shook her head. "Too big. And look at the spacing. Whatever made these wasn't walking on four legs. It was upright." That was unsettling enough, but it got worse. "The claw marks on the bodies don't match any known animal," she added. "And the precision of the cuts. It's like whatever did this knew exactly where to strike." As the investigation continued, the evidence grew stranger. The victims' phones were found smashed, but one of them, the woman's, still had its SD card intact. The tech team managed to recover a video taken shortly before the attack. It was shaky, the couple laughing as they explored the woods. The woman was holding the camera, teasing the man about getting lost. Then, a sound. It was faint at first, like a low growl, but it quickly grew louder. The camera whipped around, catching a glimpse of something in the distance. It was tall, humanoid, but covered in dark, matted fur. Its eyes glowed faintly in the low light, and its movements were unnaturally fast, jerky, like a predator sizing up its prey. The video cut out just as the creature lunged toward the couple. By the time I got back to the station that night, I was rattled. I spent hours reviewing the footage, going over the evidence, trying to make sense of it. But the more I looked, the less it made sense. The claw marks, the tracks, the sheer strength required to tear a man apart like that. It didn't fit with any known animal. And the thing in the video? It wasn't human, but it wasn't entirely animal either. It was something else. The next day, I met with Dr. Ellison, a wildlife expert who occasionally consulted on unusual cases. When I showed him the photos of the tracks and the wounds, his reaction surprised me. He went pale, his hands trembling as he adjusted his glasses. "Where did you find this?" he asked. I told him about the cabin. This shouldn't exist," he muttered, more to himself than to me. "What shouldn't exist?" He hesitated before answering. "There have been rumors, stories passed down by indigenous tribes in this region. They speak of a creature, a guardian of the forest. It's said to punish those who trespass on sacred ground. Are you saying this thing is some kind of mythological creature?" I asked, my skepticism clear. "I don't know what I'm saying," he admitted. "But whatever did this, it's not natural." That night, I couldn't sleep. The images of the crime scene, the video, the tracks, all of it replayed in my mind on an endless loop. Around midnight, I decided to review the case file again. That's when I noticed something odd. In the woman's recovered video, there was a single frame, almost too quick to catch, where the creature's face was visible. I zoomed in, my heart pounding. Its features were eerily human. The case officially remains unsolved. The forest around the cabin has been cordoned off, officially for wildlife control. Unofficially, No one wants to go near it, but I can't stop thinking about it. About the creature, its eyes, the way it moved, and about the fact that, deep in the woods, there are places we were never meant to go. Some things aren't meant to be understood. But one thing is clear. Whatever killed those people that night, it wasn't human. And it's still out there.